Good evening, everybody. I'm used to saying good morning, but it's good evening. And I really appreciate the flexibility of being able to do this evening to make up for this morning. There was actually an additional reason I wanted to make sure we learned today, besides the fact I didn't want to lose a week. Today was the last day that the family has been saying Kaddish for Avram. We know we do this class is legally Nishmat Avigdor Chai Avram Ben Meretzi Rachalea, and today was the last day of saying Kaddish, and it dovetails with tonight being Zayin Adar of the yard site and the birthday of Moshe Rabbeinu. So it's a very auspicious day. And in addition to that, we will continue to learn for Refuah Shlema for Hallel Miriam Bat Rivka Nechamat Ziona, and wish her and the family a Refuah Shlema and Chizuk. In the small version of the book, we are on page 63. And whatever version you're using, we're going to start with the paragraph that says, Be'inyan netinat eitzah. Be'inyan netinat eitzah. Let me just put my phone on mute. Yeah. And again, this continues with many more pages. We're probably going to be on this chapter for, I don't know, a couple months more. That has to do with all these different topics wherein we find there are areas that we know the big picture, but it's the little picture that sometimes eludes us, and we try to do something and have to focus on that. And tonight's first topic is going to be about giving advice. We'll probably get to two topics tonight. One is giving advice, and the other is rechilut / lashon hara. But let's talk about giving advice. There are times that people learn. Well, I'm just going to term as self-help books that we learn, Sfarim that we learn to try to improve our lives, and that's really the purpose of Mesilat Yesharim. We're supposed to try and improve our lives. We're not just here to get together, which is also nice, but we're supposed to put some of these things at least into practice. And you come to certain topics that, well, that doesn't apply to me, not because I don't mess up in the area, but I don't get involved in that. And the truth is, you'd be wrong to say that about netinat eitzah, about giving advice. One way or another, you are giving advice on a kind of frequent basis. It could be a coworker, a family member, a friend, an next door neighbor, a child, a spouse, yourself. So you think, like, what in the world would you have to be so concerned about when you're giving somebody advice? Ad kedei kach, he has to spend about 25 lines talking about giving advice. Let's take a look. B'inyan netinat eitzah, Shaninu b'Torat Kohanim, we learn in Sefer Vayikra the following. It says, "V'lifnei iver lo titein michshol." You should not put a stumbling block before a blind person. And the concept being not just the literal definition, which is in Isur, that if someone's blind walking down the street, and you put something in front of them to trip them, besides being a horrible human being, it's also an Isur d'oraita, a Torah-based prohibition. But it also means lifnei suma b'davar, someone who is blind in a certain area. If I come to you for advice, I'm not sure if I should take a job. I'm not sure if I should do X. To a certain degree, that is an unknown to me. In some cases, maybe I have absolutely no idea what I want to do. Sometimes I might have a pro and con list. But as far as the direction I want to go, at the moment I'm blind. I don't see the direction I want to go. And I'm coming to you for advice. So if you put a stumbling block in my way, and we'll see what that means, then you've done the same problem. You've done the lifnei iver lo titein michshol. What kind of stumbling block could you put in front of me, though? Let's take a look. Because I would say an unusual example to start with. Amar lach bat ploni mahila kuhuna. What happens if someone asks you, can this woman marry a Kohen? And we know that a Kohen is not allowed to marry a divorcee. And the question is, you're asked, oh, this woman, I want to set her up with so-and-so. He's a Kohen. Is it okay that he can go out with her? And you say, yeah, sure. She's never been married before. Or vice versa. No, let's just keep it with what he says right now. Al tomar lo kishera. Don't say she's kosher to go out with the Kohen. V'hi'ena ela psula, when in fact she is prohibited to marry him. That's one example. Next examples, and from here on out, a little bit more common. By the way, I don't think it's only the example of the Kohen and the the woman who's prohibited to marry the Kohen. But I think this actually deals a lot in what he puts in a very pithy statement. It encompasses a lot more. And I think it also encompasses when someone, I'm sure many of you have been involved with either trying to set somebody up or someone's asked you their opinion about somebody that should be set up with somebody. If you know, and this does happen to me plenty, unfortunately, I guess, fortunately, unfortunately, if you know lechatchila up front that this guy that's being suggested for the girl or vice versa, it's not a match. I mean, there's just no way. Okay, maybe you could still say, look, be open and honest. I don't think it's the right match, but if that's something that you're interested in pursuing, then besimcha. But what if it's something that you know there's a very serious issue, and you don't say anything, but you say, yeah, sure, go ahead. You know that this woman or this man is a serial dater, and then after 2 or 3 dates, breaks the girl's heart or breaks the guy's heart and has just done whatever they do and move on. And you say, yeah, perfect. It's a great shidduch. That's lifnei iver lo titen michshol. In addition to that, someone comes to ask your advice. You cannot give them bad advice or advice that's not proper for that individual. Gives an example. Don't tell this guy, you know what? I have a good business idea for you. You want to know what you think you should do? I'll tell you. You have a field. I want you to sell your field and buy a donkey or buy a bunch of donkeys with the field. But why is he doing this? Why is he giving that advice? You kind of do an end round around the guy. And the reason you're really advising him to sell his field is because you were looking to buy it. You had a vested interest. Shema Tomar, you might say, wait a minute. I'm giving him good advice. The donkey is worth 1,000 shekel. This piece of garbage land is worth 50 shekel. What's the big deal? You're saying I'm giving him good advice. This is something that only you in your heart will really know. What does that mean? There are a number of mitzvot in the Torah, a number of prohibitions that say, you should fear God. For example, you are supposed to, as you see an elderly individual walk by, you're supposed to stand up. It does not mean you have to stand up the entire way, but even just a little bit, just to show honor and respect. What if you just keep I see the guy coming, or I see the woman coming, right? I keep my head down, right? And the person even notices I'm sitting there, and they could think, oh, he didn't get up for me. And most people wouldn't think that way, but okay, oh, he must not see me because, oh yeah, he's looking down. But I know I saw him out of the corner of my eye. I saw him coming. So I waited, I put my head down, I got on the phone, I put my head down. Who really knows that happens? Only you and Hashem. Hashem, he's ro'el leivav. He sees the heart. He knows exactly what happened here. We have that in many instances. In this case here, when I might give, or someone say myself, if someone gives bad advice and they had a vested interest, even on the surface, they may say, I had your best interest in mind and best interest at heart and all. But only deep down did you know you didn't? That's between you and God. We learn from this. Whether it's a situation where you might have a vested interest, or you have no vested interest whatsoever. When someone comes to you for advice, you have to give them honest, clear, unadulterated advice. You can say, look, I'm really not sure. Here's what I think. And by the way, if you do have some nigiyut, which we're going to see, if you do have some vested interest in, as they would say in English, skin in the game, you have to be honest. You have to be open. And we're going to see what happens in that situation in a minute. But if you have nothing to do with the case, someone comes to you for stam advice, you have to do it to the best of your ability, honestly, with no ulterior motives. And we're going to see the benchmark he uses soon too on how to do that. Matter of fact, the Torah has kind of, so to speak, has gone to the depths of a person who is in fact a thief or a swindler. We're not dealing with a bunch of fools. Whose harmful advice everyone knows, it's pretty obvious. What are we talking about here? We're talking about people who are smart, clever, who know how to use the gift of gab to make it give advice, when in fact it might not be the best thing to do. They would give advice to their friends. On the surface, it would seem, looks pretty good. Looks like their friend's going to benefit from this advice. But in the end result, it really is not to the best benefit of the friend. It may harm the person even. And it'll be to the benefit of the one giving advice. I gave you the example, I think last week when I was first introducing this section, that let's say David likes Tamar and he hasn't asked her out yet. And then along comes Donnie and he asked David, so what do you think? I'm thinking about asking this girl Tamar out. What do you think? And he could be open and say, look, you might want to, but truth is I'm really interested. That's fine. That's perfectly okay. But if he says, nah, please, look, it's Lashon Hara, I can't say anything, but you're better off not. Why is he doing that? On the surface, it looks like he's trying to help his friend. Look, saved you, right? Because deep down, he wants to go out with her. So all of a sudden, when they see he bumps into his friend, Danny, and David and Tamar on a date. So what you told me? He says, yeah, we talked about it. And no, it doesn't work that way. Therefore, they said, Shema Itza Yafa, because you might think that, okay, you're giving, it looks like it was some good advice. You're even thinking you're giving good advice, but tachlis, you know deep down you're not giving good advice. Again, this goes back to the whole issue, even when we talked about food and kosher, non-kosher, and the idea of money. It's being honest with yourself. It's, can you look at yourself in the mirror? And justifying things and these justifications and all. That's what this is a common thread throughout. How much people really fall into this trap daily. Because what is it? What would be my motivation to give you bad advice? Now, we're not talking about someone who gives bad advice because they just don't know how to give advice. Okay, we're not talking about someone who just doesn't give good advice, then don't go to that person. But why would I purposely give bad advice? That's the question. So there's two main possibilities. One is I have something to benefit from it, which is what he's addressing now. The other one, anyone want to guess what might be the other reason? I would think it's easy or obvious. If you do guess, you have to take yourself off mute. Okay. Revenge. I want to hurt the guy. He did something to me. I want to take revenge, which we're going to talk about, but not tonight. That's going to be, I might get to it tonight. We'll see. It's two more topics later. This guy hurt me one time. So you know what I'm going to do? And matter of fact, it happened in 4th grade. And now we're in our 50s and our 60s and our 70s. Now I have a long memory. So I'm going to give him bad advice. Okay, but we're not talking about that. We're talking now where I have a vested interest. Because the other is what's called nekima netira, which we're going to get to, Bezrat Hashem. Let's continue. So here he says the main reason that people would do it is because they're seeking the almighty buck. They want to make money on it. They want to have a vested interest. In Sefer Dvarim, you know that there is a section where Bnei Yisrael sit half on one mountain, Har Eival, the other half on Har Grizim, the Levim down below in the middle, Kohanim, Levim in the middle, saying, I wore this, I wore that, and everyone has to say Amen, and Baruch, and they all say Amen to that. One of the curses is, cursed is the one who misdirects, misguides the blind person on their path, which kind of echoes the idea of Lifnei Iver lo titein michshol. Okay, so you know, after you see this, you read this, it's like, oh, you know what? If someone comes to you for advice, I'm going to tell them, go ask somebody else altogether. Not because I don't know, but because I'm afraid I'll fall into the trap of maybe somehow I'll give the bad advice because maybe I'll have some little scintilla of an idea that might help me one way or another. The following is how you give advice. This is the right way of a person who's yashar, who's straight. When someone comes to take counsel with you, you have to pretend you're on the other side of the table, that you're the one receiving the advice, and you would give him the best advice. You want to get the best advice possible. Okay, in Kvar, you're going to ask someone for advice. You also would like to be able to know that you're getting the best. So you kind of put yourself in that person's position and say, I want the best advice. If I want to give him the best advice. With only one goal in mind. And that goal has to be, it has to be for the benefit of that individual who's asking. With no other gain. Whether it's a pretty straightforward close-up one that you might really get benefit, or even a long-distance one. What does it mean it could be a distant benefit? What happens if you have somebody who is a coworker and they come to you for advice about something? And you see the writing on the wall, the way things are working, that person is going to end up becoming your supervisor down the road. Not even now, but down the road, they're really on the fast track. So when you give them advice, and it's decent advice, you may color it with, well, down the road, I want to make sure I'm on their good side, so I'm going to put them down one path instead of the other, because that person may have a good memory and it'll be to my benefit. Again, that's a little down the road. It's a little far-fetched, but it's still, if you want to be a naki, then you can't give that kind of advice with that in mind. What if someone does come to you with advice, and you do know that if you give good advice, that really the best thing that person is going to do, you yourself could have a negative reaction or negative repercussions from that? If he's able to still do it and say, look, I have to put my needs aside. I remember learning Mesilat Yesharim, and I'm going to put my needs aside, even though it may hurt me in the long run. I'm going to give the guy the best advice possible. Then you do it. But if you can't do that, then you have to recuse yourself. This happens all the time. You have judges and you have lawyers, you have other individuals who have to recuse themselves from a case because they're too close. I'll give you an example, a personal example. If one of my daughters asked me halachic shaila that I know that it'll also affect me based on whatever the question is, or I know how, whatever, without getting into any details, then I will say, you know what? I want you to ask so-and-so because I think I'm too close to this question. I mean, I'm not talking about kosher, not kosher, but you got to make sure that you don't put any of yourself into the question. That's really important. You cannot inject any advice that will cause, that's bad advice, that causes something not to his benefit, with one exception. What happens if the guy is looking to do something that's not okay? Take a school example, because I'm in education. I always try to take an example from schools. One guy comes to another guy and says, look, I don't know trigonometry at all, and we have a big final tomorrow. Look, what's better? Should I try and sneak in a little piece of paper with it in my shoe? Should I put it into my calculator? What's the best way to do that? So you just learn Mesilat Yesharim, right? You don't have any vested interest, and you're going to tell the guy, yeah, best thing to do is write a little crib sheet, stick it in your shoe, no problem. You gave him good advice. No. Because there he's doing something wrong. In that case, she'az vaday mitzvah leramoto. In that situation, you have a mitzvah to trick the guy himself. Ukva means you give him the bad advice. Ukva ne'emar v'imikesh titpatal. V'chushai ha'arki yochiach. There's a situation, I'm not going with the whole story, in Shmuel Bet. It says here, Perek Yud Zayin, I think. No, Yud Chet. No, It's not, I think it's, hold on, let me see where it is, just so I quote the right place. It's Perek Yud Zayin. I was right the first time. That Hushai Arki there's a whole big deal going on. The man named Achitofel giving Avshalom some bad advice, and how Hushai Arki purposely was giving bad advice to prevent David from getting hurt. Long story, you want to check it out, Shmuel Bet Perek Yud Zayin. It's very interesting in narrative there. But when someone's trying to do something that is not good, then not only should you not give them good advice to help them, you should give them bad advice to confound their plan. So that's the idea about when it comes to giving advice. Interestingly enough, when it comes to this next paragraph of Rechilut and Lashon Hara, which, as you know, there are many, many, many hundreds of books written on it, he gives a very short little paragraph, but there's a reason. He starts off with the premise that everyone knows what Lashon Hara is. We all know you don't talk Lashon Hara. Is there anyone who says it's okay to talk Lashon Hara? No, no one says it's okay to talk Lashon Hara. And when it is permitted, it's not Lashon Hara. I'll give you an example of what I mean in a different arena. Are you allowed to eat a ham sandwich? Of course not. You're not allowed to eat a ham sandwich. It's asur. However, if you are forced to eat a ham sandwich because of medical reasons, a medical test, and I actually had this question one time, that's why I'm mentioning it, and that's the controlled item that has to be eaten, and it's a life-saving measure, and whatever it might be, or God forbid the extreme, someone puts a gun to your head and says, eat the ham sandwich or I'll kill you. Not only do you eat it, you make a bracha on it, because you can't have benefit from something, because now it became mutar for you to eat. You can't have benefit from something that you, so it's technically not non-kosher at the moment. Sometimes Lashon Hara is permitted, but it's not considered Lashon Hara then, okay? And we're not going to get into that tonight. But so he starts up, the premise is Lashon Hara, everyone knows. What about what's called Avak Lashon Hara, the dust of Lashon Hara? Take a look at the paragraph. Harachilut Lashon Hara, when it comes to rechilut, which is tail-bearing, tattletaling, in Lashon Hara, by the way, just as an aside, just to make sure it's very clear, Lashon Hara is when you say something negative about somebody that is true. You know, I like say, oh, it's Lashon Hara. No, it's not, it's true. Well, yeah, that's the definition of Lashon Hara. Otherwise, it's Motzi Shem Ra. Not only is the Isur of Lashon Hara well known, but all the different permutations therein are well known. So what's the problem here? He says, I'm going to make reference back to something I mentioned earlier. Gemara in Bava Batra, it says, everyone ends up somehow, one way or another, getting involved in what's called the dust of Lashon Hara. What does that mean? It means it's not direct Lashon Hara. I don't say to you, Joe Schmo is the laziest guy I've met in my life. He cheats on his taxes. I didn't say that. Okay, that's Lashon Hara. What's Lavak Lashon Hara? Who's going to tell us? Now, I'm going to read this Gemara he's going to mention, and I'm going to read the Gemara itself, the next couple lines, because he doesn't say the next couple lines. I think it's really important too. The Gemara Arachin says, Heichi Dami Avak Lashon Hara. What exactly would be an example of Avak Lashon Hara? So he says, Kigon da'amar hecha mishtakach nura elabe planya. That where do we really find a fire? Only in so-and-so's house. Well, what does that mean? We find fire in somebody's house? So the Gemara is talking about these various cases of what could be considered Avak Lashon Hara. What does it mean that the fire is always in their house? It's an indirect way of saying they're always cooking. They're gluttons. They eat constantly. The fire, meaning the fire in their stove never goes out. So that's the way he gives in the book. The Ramchal mentions it. But I want to read to you the actual Gemara, the next couple lines. Okay, he says as follows. I'm going to read the Gemara, which I just read, plus a couple lines. Amar Ika Nura Be Planya, Amar Le Abaye. So Abaye said to the one who authored the previous statement about, oh, they always find fire in this person's house. Maika Avid, Gluye Milta Be Almahu. If someone said, where do you always find fire? I need to light a candle or whatever it is. Where, oh, you can always find a fire in that guy's house. So if his purpose was, he said, what is just a big deal? All he's doing is telling you where there's fire to be found. El demapik belishna bisha. But the way he's saying it is in a negative way. Damar hecha mishtakach nura ela be planya. He says, why you know why you could go light a candle there? You're always going to find a fire because there's always food being cooked. Don't worry about it. Bunch of gluttons over there. If he says, oh, you need a light? No problem. The guy over there has a fire always. That's not Lashon Hara. That's why it's important to me to mention the Gemara's next line. Because if someone says to you, I need to light my yard side candle. I don't have any matches. Where can I find someone who's got a light? You go, oh, go over there. He's always got a fire. That would sound like Lashon Hara. It's not. It's when you have a negative connotation to the statement. I'm going to see a couple more examples that are more common. This one happens without us even realizing it. Two people are talking, and you say, oh, Dr. Cohn, what a sweetheart. He is such a nice guy. But you also know that the guy you're talking to can't stand Dr. Cohn. Well, what'd you say wrong? You said he's a nice guy. But what happens? This next guy you're talking to will say, give me a break. So it is a lead into Lashon Hara. All these similar types of cases, even though they seem so far away and removed from the concept of Lashon Hara, Rechilut, they're the dust of Lashon Hara. The general rule is as follows. We have to not forget there's something really critical here. One of the let's say motivators of giving someone bad advice, for example, we said is money. One of the motivators of not dealing honestly in business, money. One of the motivators of not eating something that you shouldn't be, eating something you shouldn't be eating, and you justify it to yourself. Not money, it's another drive. It's hunger, it's food. You have the lust for the food, whatever it might be, the desire, I shouldn't say lust, the desire for the food. What's the motivator in speaking Lashon Hara? It's not money. What happens? It makes you feel good. Look, I got a juicy piece on somebody. Okay, yes, it could be also trying to get revenge. It could be all bunch of stuff. But I'm talking, what's the drive in general? When people speak Lashon Hara, no one sits down and say, oh, what's my benefit? What am I going to gain on this? Because there's almost zero benefit, and you have so much to lose. So therefore, he points out, the Yetzer Hara has a tremendous amount of avenues with which to trick us into doing these things. Anything, any statement that could potentially lead to damage or embarrassment of his friend, whether the person's in front of you or not, it falls into the category of Lashon Hara, which is abominable, hated and abominable before Hashem. Shamru Allah, that said about a person who speaks Lashon Hara, if you speak Lashon Hara, it's as if you are an apostate, a denying God almost. Says in the Pasuk Tilim, Miloshni. So you have a responsibility. By the way, you can speak Lashon Hara without opening your mouth. It could be an eye roll. For example, the same exact thing I said to you before. You're talking to somebody who you don't know, they don't like Dr. Cohn, right? You say, Dr. Cohn, what a sweetheart. And the response is just like, just a gesture, just like that. That's already a Avak Lashon Hara. Because you now planted in the mind of this other person, oh, maybe he's not such a great guy. That's why there are all these books from Chavetz Chaim and all these other books about learning about Lashon Hara. It's insidious. I'm sure I've told this class before because I've told every other class I ever taught after I saw it in Brooklyn many years ago, the baseball cap that says, tell it to me, and I'll let you know if it's Lashon Hara. And that's pretty funny, but unfortunately, some people do actually live by that credo. Tov. So Bezrat Hashem all goes well. Next Tuesday morning, we will continue. Sorry, Wednesday morning, which is Tanit Esther, I know, but that's fine. We will continue with the topics of Sin'ah and Nikima, which are hatred and trying to take revenge against somebody, and Nikima and Netira, which is another form of hate of revenge. We'll see the difference, and maybe get into Shavuot, which are swearing in oaths, which doesn't really sound like what it means on the surface necessarily. In the meantime, once again, thank you all for being available this evening. Just B'Sarot Tovot, and have a great evening. Be well.
Thank you very, very much.